My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from an unknown number. "This is Vanessa Chen. I think we should talk." I showed the message to Jennifer. "It looks like I'm about to meet another one of Marcus's victims." We arranged to meet Vanessa that evening at the same coffee shop. When she arrived, I was struck by how different she looked from her Instagram photos. In person, she seemed smaller, more fragile, with dark circles under her eyes and a nervous energy that suggested she hadn't been sleeping well. "Thank you for meeting me," Vanessa said as she sat down. "I wasn't sure you'd want to see me." "I'm not angry at you," I said. "I'm angry at Marcus." "You didn't know he was married when this started, did you?" "No," Vanessa said, shaking her head. "He told me he was separated, that his divorce was almost finalized. He said his wife had moved out months ago and they were just waiting for the paperwork to be completed." "When did you find out the truth?" "3 days ago when he called me crying, saying his wife had found out about us and was trying to destroy him in the divorce," Vanessa said. "That's when I realized he'd been lying to me about everything." "What else did he lie about?" Vanessa's face crumpled. "Everything. He told me he loved me, that he wanted to marry me after his divorce was final. He said I was the love of his life, that he'd never felt this way about anyone before. But then I found out about the dating apps. You found his dating profiles?" "I found his phone," Vanessa said. "He left it at my apartment, and when it kept buzzing with notifications, I looked at it. He's been talking to dozens of women, Sarah, dozens, all while telling me I was the only one." Jennifer and I exchanged glances. "He's been pursuing multiple women simultaneously," I said. "You, Jennifer, probably others we don't even know about." "There's something else," Vanessa said. "Marcus has been asking me for money too. He said his wife had frozen their joint accounts out of spite, that he needed help covering his legal fees." "How much did you give him?" Jennifer asked. $8,000, Vanessa said, and she started crying. "I liquidated my savings account, because I believed him when he said he was being financially abused by his vindictive ex-wife. I felt sick. Marcus hadn't just been cheating on me. He'd been running a sophisticated con game, using his sob story about our marriage to manipulate vulnerable women into giving him money. "We need to go to the police," I said. "This isn't just adultery anymore, this is fraud." "Will they actually do anything?" Jennifer asked. "I don't know," I said. "But we have to try. Marcus can't be allowed to keep doing this to other women." Over the next hour, the three of us compared our experiences with Marcus. The pattern was clear and disturbing. He would meet women on dating apps, tell them he was recently divorced or separated, paint me as a mentally unstable ex-wife who was making his life hell, and then ask for financial help to deal with his legal troubles. But what was most chilling was how he'd tailored his lies to each woman's specific vulnerabilities. To Jennifer, a successful surgeon, he'd emphasized his financial success and painted me as someone who was trying to destroy a good man out of spite. To Vanessa, who had her own history of anxiety, he'd focused on my supposed mental health issues and portrayed himself as a caring husband who had tried everything to help his sick wife. "He's not just a cheater," Jennifer said. "He's a predator. He studies women, figures out what they want to hear, and then tells them exactly that. And he uses real details from his life to make the lies more believable," Vanessa added. "He told me about your anxiety, Sarah, but he twisted it to make you sound dangerous and unstable." As we sat there, three women who had all been manipulated by the same man, I realized that Marcus's betrayal of me was just the tip of the iceberg. He was a serial manipulator who had been using his charm and his sob story to exploit vulnerable women for money. "I'm going to destroy him," I said quietly. "What do you mean?" Vanessa asked. "I mean, I'm going to make sure everyone knows what he really is," I said. "His friends, his colleagues, his clients, his family. I'm going to make sure that no other woman falls for his lies." "How?" Jennifer asked. "I'm going to tell the truth," I said. "All of it, and I'm going to make sure it gets heard." As we left the coffee shop that night, I realized that my divorce from Marcus wasn't just about ending a marriage anymore. It was about stopping a predator who had been using his position and his charm to manipulate and exploit women. Marcus had made the mistake of thinking I was weak, that I would quietly accept his betrayal and disappear from his life without causing trouble. He was about to learn how wrong he was. The real battle was just beginning, and this time I wasn't fighting alone. As I finished packing my bag at Lisa's house that evening, my phone started ringing. It was Marcus, calling for the 5th time in 2 hours. I'd been ignoring his calls, but I could see from the preview of his text messages that he was spiraling. Sarah, please call me back. We need to talk about this. I know I messed up, but we can fix this. Don't throw away 8 years. I'm ending things with Vanessa right now. I'm deleting all the dating apps. Please give me another chance. The desperation in his messages was almost pathetic. This was the same man who had spent months making me feel like I was losing my mind, who had systematically undermined my confidence and made me doubt my own perceptions. Now that his lies were exposed, he was begging for forgiveness. But what struck me most was how quickly he'd shifted tactics. When gaslighting and manipulation hadn't worked, when he couldn't make me doubt the evidence I'd presented, he'd immediately switched to playing the victim. Now he was the confused husband who had made mistakes, the remorseful man who just needed another chance. It was all an act, just like everything else had been. Lisa knocked on the guest bedroom door. "How are you holding up?" she asked. "Better than I expected," I said honestly. "I thought I'd be devastated, but mostly I just feel free." "That's normal," Lisa said. "You've been living in a state of constant confusion and self-doubt for months. Now that you know the truth, your brain can finally relax." My phone buzzed with another text from Marcus. "I drove by the house. Your car isn't there. Where are you staying? We need to talk face to face." "He's trying to find me," I said, showing Lisa the message. Lisa's expression darkened. "That's concerning. Sarah, I think you should block his number. All communication should go through your attorney from now on." "Is that legal? Can I just stop talking to him?" "You're separated and filing for divorce," Lisa said. "You have no obligation to communicate with him directly, especially given his pattern of manipulation and emotional abuse." I blocked Marcus's number and immediately felt a sense of relief. For the first time in months, I wouldn't have to worry about his calls and texts, wouldn't have to brace myself for his attempts to make me doubt my own sanity. But that relief was short-lived. An hour later, Lisa's doorbell rang. "Sarah!" Marcus's voice came through the door. "I know you're in there. Your car is in the driveway. Please, just talk to me for 5 minutes." Lisa and I looked at each other. "Don't answer it," she said quietly. "Sarah." "Please," Marcus called out, and I could hear the desperation in his voice. "I love you. I know I screwed up, but I love you. We can work through this." "I'm calling the police," Lisa whispered, reaching for her phone. "Wait," I said. Something about hearing Marcus's voice, about the raw emotion in it, made me realize that I needed to have one final conversation with him. Not because I wanted to reconcile, but because I needed him to understand that his manipulation and gaslighting had consequences. "I'll talk to him," I said, "but only with you here as a witness." Lisa looked concerned. "Sarah, are you sure? You don't owe him anything." "I'm not doing this for him," I said. "I'm doing this for me. I need him to hear what he put me through. I need him to understand the damage he caused." We opened the door to find Marcus standing on Lisa's front porch, looking disheveled and desperate. His hair was messy, his clothes were wrinkled, and his eyes were red from crying. This was not the composed, confident man I'd married. This was someone whose carefully constructed facade had completely crumbled. "Thank you," he said when he saw me. "Thank you for talking to me." "You have 5 minutes," I said, "and Lisa stays here the entire time." Marcus nodded frantically. "Sarah, I know I hurt you. I know I lied to you, but I need you to understand that I never meant for any of this to happen." "You didn't mean for it to happen?" I repeated. "Marcus, you've been having affairs for years. You've been systematically lying to me, gaslighting me, making me doubt my own sanity. None of that was accidental." "I was confused," Marcus said. "I was going through something, questioning everything about my life. I didn't know how to handle it." So, you decided to handle it by making me think I was mentally unstable? I asked. Every time I questioned your behavior, you made me feel like I was being paranoid. You used my anxiety disorder against me, Marcus. You weaponized my health struggles to cover your own infidelity. Marcus's face crumpled. I know. I know that was wrong. But I was scared, Sarah. I was scared of losing you. Scared of hurting you. Scared of destroying our marriage. You were scared of facing consequences. I corrected. You weren't scared of hurting me. You were hurting me every single day for months. You were scared of getting caught. That's not true, Marcus said desperately. I love you, Sarah. I've always loved you. The affairs, they didn't mean anything. They were just distractions. Distractions? I felt my anger flare. Vanessa was a distraction? The woman you told you loved, the woman you bought expensive jewelry for, the woman you took on romantic getaways? She was just a distraction? Yes, Marcus said, and I could see that he genuinely believed this would somehow make me feel better. She was never a threat to our marriage. You're my wife, Sarah. You're the one I chose to build a life with. You chose to build a life with me while actively destroying that life with your lies, I said. You chose to make me doubt my own sanity, rather than be honest about what you were doing. I was trying to protect you, Marcus said again. Stop saying that, I snapped. You weren't protecting me. You were protecting yourself. You wanted to have your affairs without facing any consequences, so you made me think I was crazy for suspecting the truth. Marcus was quiet for a moment, and I could see him struggling to find another angle, another way to manipulate the situation in his favor. What can I do? He asked finally. What can I do to fix this? Nothing, I said. There's nothing you can do, Marcus. The trust is gone. The respect is gone. The love is gone. You killed our marriage with your lies and manipulation. But we took vows, Marcus said, and suddenly there was an edge to his voice. For better or worse, in sickness and in health, you're supposed to fight for our marriage. I did fight for our marriage, I said. I fought for it every time I ignored my instincts because you convinced me they were wrong. I fought for it every time I increased my anxiety medication because you made me think my concerns were symptoms of mental illness. I fought for it every time I chose to trust you instead of trusting myself. So that's it? Marcus asked, and now he was getting angry. You're just going to throw away 8 years because I made some mistakes? Some mistakes? I repeated incredulously. Marcus, you've been living a double life for months. You've been having multiple affairs, lying to multiple women, using our joint money to fund your deception. That's not a mistake. That's a pattern of behavior that shows me exactly who you really are. Fine, Marcus said, and suddenly his mask slipped completely. The desperate, remorseful husband disappeared, replaced by someone cold and calculating. If that's how you want to play this, fine. But don't think you're going to take me for everything in the divorce. I have rights too. There it was, the real Marcus, the one who had been hiding behind the facade of the loving husband. When manipulation and emotional appeals didn't work, he immediately shifted to threats and intimidation. Actually, I said calmly, given that you've been using marital assets to fund multiple affairs, and given that you've been committing fraud by lying to other women about your marital status, I think you'll find that I have more rights than you realize. Marcus's face went white. What do you mean? I mean, my attorney is very interested in the evidence I've gathered, I said. The credit card charges, the phone records, the messages where you discussed hoping I would have a mental breakdown. All of it. You can't use private messages in, court, Marcus said, but I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. Actually, I can, I said. Especially when they show a pattern of emotional abuse and financial deception. But don't take my word for it. Ask your attorney. I'm sure you'll be hiring one soon. Marcus stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him realizing that the woman he'd been manipulating for months was gone. In her place was someone who knew exactly who he was and what he was capable of. Someone who had evidence of every lie he'd told and every betrayal he'd committed. I never thought you had it in you, he said finally. Had what in me? This, he said, gesturing at me. This coldness. This calculation. I always thought you were too soft, too trusting. I was too trusting, I agreed, but you cured me of that. Congratulations, Marcus. You turned your loving, supportive wife into someone who will never trust you again. Sarah, he started. Your 5 minutes are up, I said. And if you come to Lisa's house again, we'll call the police. I stepped back inside and closed the door, leaving Marcus standing on the porch. Through the window, I watched him walk slowly back to his car, his shoulders slumped in defeat. How do you feel? Lisa asked. I thought about it. How did I feel? Not sad, not devastated, not heartbroken. I felt powerful. For the first time in months, I felt like I was in control of my own life. I feel like I just took my power back, I said. And as I watched Marcus drive away, I realized that the hardest part was over. I'd confronted him, I'd stood up to his manipulation, and I'd made it clear that I would never again allow him to make me doubt my own reality. The divorce would be complicated, the financial negotiations would be difficult, and rebuilding my life would take time. But I'd already accomplished the most important thing. I'd reclaimed my sense of self. Marcus had tried to destroy me with his lies and gaslighting. Instead, he'd made me stronger than I'd ever been before. 3 days after I confronted Marcus, I was sitting in Lisa's guest bedroom when my phone started buzzing with calls from numbers I didn't recognize. The first few I ignored, assuming they were spam or wrong numbers. But when the 7th call came in within an hour, I decided to answer. Is this Sarah Mitchell? Asked a woman's voice I didn't recognize. Yes, I said cautiously. Who is this? My name is Jennifer Walsh, she said. I think we need to talk. It's about Marcus. The name didn't mean anything to me, but something in her tone made me pay attention. What about Marcus? I've been seeing him for the past 2 months, Jennifer said. I just found out he's married. To you. My blood went cold. Even after everything I'd discovered, even after confronting him with evidence of his affair with Vanessa and his activity on dating apps, Marcus had continued pursuing other women. How did you find out? I asked. A mutual friend saw the divorce papers being served to him yesterday and told me, Jennifer said. I had no idea he was married. He told me he was recently divorced and looking for a serious relationship. I closed, my eyes feeling a familiar wave of anger and disgust. Even now, even after being caught, Marcus was still lying to new women, still manipulating them into believing he was available and honest. Can we meet? Jennifer asked. I think there are things you should know. We met that afternoon at a coffee shop in downtown Denver. Jennifer was a beautiful woman in her early 30s, a pediatric surgeon at National Jewish Health. She was exactly the type Marcus would be attracted to. Successful, intelligent, sophisticated. And she was exactly the type who would never knowingly get involved with a married man. I'm so sorry, Jennifer said as soon as we sat down. If I had known he was married, I never would have gone out with him. I feel terrible that I was unknowingly part of hurting you. You didn't know, I said. Marcus is very good at lying. Trust me, I lived with him for 8 years and didn't realize the extent of his deception until 3 weeks ago. Jennifer shook her head. I should have seen the signs. He was always vague about his living situation, always wanted to meet at my place or at restaurants, never invited me to his house, and he was so secretive about his phone. That's exactly how he operated with his other affairs, I said. How did you meet him? On Raya, Jennifer said. The dating app, his profile, said he was a successful real estate developer who was recently divorced and looking for someone to build a life with. Recently divorced, I repeated bitterly. He was telling you that while he was still living in our house, still sleeping in our bed every night. There's more, Jennifer said, looking uncomfortable. He's been talking about you. About his crazy ex-wife who was mentally unstable and made his life hell during their marriage. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. He said I was mentally unstable? He said you had severe anxiety and depression, that you were paranoid and controlling, that you made false accusations about him cheating, Jennifer said. He painted himself as this long-suffering husband who had tried everything to help you, but finally had to leave for his own mental health. The manipulation was breathtaking. Even after being caught, even after I'd confronted him with irrefutable evidence of his affairs, Marcus was still rewriting history to make himself the victim. He was telling new women that I was the problem, that I was the unstable one, that he was the innocent party who had suffered through a marriage to a mentally ill woman. "That's not what happened," I said, and I could hear my voice shaking with rage. "I do have anxiety, but Marcus used that against me. He made me doubt my own perceptions, made me think I was being paranoid when I was actually seeing the truth about his affairs." "I believe you," Jennifer said quickly. "After talking to you, after seeing how calm and rational you are, I realized that everything he told me was probably a lie." "What else did he tell you about me?" Jennifer looked even more uncomfortable. "He said you were financially irresponsible, that you had spent all your joint savings on shopping and therapy. He said he was worried about his financial security after the divorce because you would probably try to take everything." "I'm a pediatric nurse," I said. "I make good money, and I've always been careful with our finances. Marcus is the one who spent thousands of our joint money on gifts for his mistresses." "I'm starting to realize that," Jennifer said. "Sarah, there's something else. He's been asking me for money." "What?" "He said his assets were frozen during the divorce proceedings, that his crazy ex-wife had somehow managed to tie up all his accounts," Jennifer said. "He asked me to loan him $5,000 to cover his expenses until everything got sorted." "Out!" I stared at her in disbelief. "Did you give it to him?" "I was going to," Jennifer admitted. "I felt so sorry for him, this successful man who was being destroyed by his vindictive ex-wife. But something didn't feel right, so I decided to do some research first. That's how I found out he was still married." "He's not just a cheater," I said. "He's a con artist. He's using his sob story about his crazy ex-wife to manipulate women into giving him money." That afternoon, I did something I'd never done before. I hired a private investigator. Patricia had recommended someone named David Chen, no relation to Vanessa, thankfully, who specialized in marital investigations. David was a former police detective who now worked exclusively on divorce cases, and he had the kind of methodical approach that I knew I needed. "I want to know everything," I told David during our first meeting. "How long this has been going on, whether there have been other women, what he's been telling her about me, what he's been telling his friends and colleagues. I want a complete picture of who my husband really is." "That's going to take some time," David warned. "And it's going to be expensive." "I don't care about the cost," I said. "I need to know the truth." David's investigation revealed things that were even worse than I'd imagined. Marcus and Vanessa had been having an affair for 8 months, not 6. It had started during our vacation in Cabo, when Marcus had supposedly been getting drinks at the hotel bar while I was taking a nap. He'd met Vanessa, who was there on a girls' trip, and they'd exchanged numbers. But what made it even more devastating was learning that this wasn't Marcus's first affair. David found evidence of at least 2 other relationships over the course of our marriage: a 6-month affair with a colleague 3 years ago, and a brief fling with a client 2 years ago. Both had ended when the women got tired of being involved with a married man, not because Marcus had chosen to be faithful to me. "Your husband has a pattern," David explained during one of our meetings. "He's what we call a serial cheater. He gets involved with women who are initially willing to be the other woman, but when they start wanting more from the relationship, he either ends it or finds a new woman to cheat with." "So Vanessa isn't special," I said. "She's just the latest in a series." "Based on what I've observed, yes," David said. "He's already showing signs of getting bored with her. He's been on dating apps, messaging other women. My guess is that this relationship will end soon too, and he'll move on to someone new." The dating apps were a revelation I hadn't expected. David showed me screenshots of Marcus's profiles on 3 different platforms: Tinder, Bumble, and a more exclusive app called Raya. In all of them, he was listed as single, using photos I recognized from our recent vacation, and describing himself as a successful entrepreneur looking for someone sophisticated and independent. "He's been actively looking for other women even while he's having an affair with Vanessa?" I asked. "It appears so," David said. "This suggests that he's not capable of being faithful to anyone, not even the woman he's cheating with. That night, I sat in my home office, looking at all the evidence I'd gathered over the past month. Credit card statements showing thousands of dollars spent on other women, phone records proving he'd been lying about his whereabouts, photos from social media, documenting his double life, screenshots of dating profiles proving he was looking for even more women to deceive. But the most damning evidence was something I'd discovered just that morning: a second phone. I'd found it hidden in Marcus's home office, tucked inside a book that had been hollowed out. It was an iPhone I'd never seen before, and when I managed to unlock it using his birthday, the same password he used for everything, I found months of text conversations with Vanessa and several other women. The messages with Vanessa were intimate and romantic, full of declarations of love and promises about their future together. But what made my blood boil were the messages about me. "She's getting suspicious again," Marcus had texted Vanessa just 2 weeks ago. "I had to convince her to increase her anxiety medication. Sometimes I think it would be easier if she just had a complete breakdown and had to be hospitalized." Vanessa had responded, "Poor baby. It must be so hard dealing with someone who's mentally unstable. You're so patient with her." "I have to be," Marcus had replied. "If I push too hard, she might actually figure out what's going on. Better to let her think she's crazy than risk her discovering the truth." Reading those messages, I felt a rage, unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Marcus hadn't just been cheating on me. He'd been actively hoping I would have a mental breakdown. He'd been discussing my mental health with his mistress, painting me as an unstable burden he had to endure. But the messages with other women were even worse. There were conversations with at least 5 different women, all of whom he was pursuing while maintaining relationships with both me and Vanessa. In these messages, he described both Vanessa and me as complications he was trying to manage, while he figured out what he really wanted. To one woman, he'd written, "I'm in the process of ending things with someone I've been seeing. She's gotten too clingy and demanding. I'm looking for someone more independent." To another, "My wife and I are separated, just waiting for the divorce to be finalized. It's been a long time coming. We've grown apart over the years." To a third, "I'm single and ready to find someone special to build a life with. I've learned a lot about what I want in a relationship, and I'm not interested in playing games." Every single message was a lie. He wasn't ending things with Vanessa. He was telling her he loved her. We weren't separated. He was coming home to me every night and pretending to be a devoted husband. He wasn't single. He was married to me and having an affair with at least one other woman while actively pursuing more. Marcus wasn't just a cheater. He was a pathological liar who was capable of maintaining multiple false realities simultaneously, telling each woman exactly what she wanted to hear while caring about none of them. The next morning, I made copies of everything on the hidden phone and then put it back exactly where I'd found it. Marcus would never know I'd discovered it, but now I had evidence of his lies to multiple women, not just me. That afternoon, I had another meeting with Patricia to show her the new evidence. "This changes everything," she said after reviewing the messages. "This isn't just marital infidelity. This is fraud. He's been lying to multiple women about his marital status, his intentions, and his other relationships. Some of these women might have legal claims against him for intentional infliction of emotional distress. What does that mean for me? It means we can argue that your husband is a serial deceiver who's been using marital assets to fund multiple fraudulent relationships," Patricia said. "It strengthens our case for you to receive a larger share of the marital assets, and it gives us leverage if he tries to fight the divorce or make unreasonable demands." "When should I confront him?" Patricia thought for a moment. "Soon," she said. "You've got enough evidence to protect yourself, and the longer you wait, the more risk there is that he'll discover what you're doing. But I want you to be strategic about how you do it." "What do you mean?" "I mean, don't do it when you're alone with him," Patricia said. "Based on what you've told me about his manipulation and emotional abuse, I'm concerned about how he might react when he realizes his lies have been exposed. Do it in a public place, or make sure you have someone with you." That evening, as I sat across from Marcus at our dining room table, watching him lie to me about his day while I knew exactly where he'd been and who he'd been with, I realized that I was ready. I was ready to stop pretending, ready to stop protecting his feelings, ready to stop letting him make me doubt my own sanity. I'd spent 8 years of my marriage believing I was lucky to be with someone like Marcus. Now I knew the truth. He was lucky to be with someone like me. Someone who had loved him unconditionally, trusted him completely, and supported his dreams and ambitions without question. But that woman was gone. The woman sitting across from him now was someone who knew exactly who he was and what he was capable of. Someone who had evidence of every lie he'd told and every betrayal he'd committed. Someone who was no longer willing to be manipulated or gaslit or made to feel crazy for trusting her own instincts. Tomorrow, I would start the process of ending our marriage. Tonight, I would let him think he'd won one last time. But Marcus had no idea that the game had already changed, and he was no longer the one controlling the rules. He was about to learn that the woman he'd been systematically undermining for months was much stronger and smarter than he'd ever given her credit for, and he was going to pay for every lie he'd told, every manipulation he'd used, and every moment he'd made me doubt my own sanity. The reckoning was coming, and I was ready for it. There was one number that Marcus had been calling and texting constantly, sometimes 20 or 30 times a day. The calls often lasted for hours, usually in the evening when he was supposedly working late. The texts were sent at all hours, including late at night and early in the morning. I reverse searched the number online and found that it belonged to someone named Vanessa Chen. A quick social media search revealed that Vanessa was a 28-year-old marketing executive who worked for a tech startup downtown. She was beautiful, sophisticated, and according to her LinkedIn profile, single. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through her Instagram photos. There she was at Bella Vista, the same restaurant where Marcus had been taking her every Tuesday. There she was at the Vail Resort where they'd spent that weekend in March. There she was wearing what looked like expensive jewelry that I was now certain my husband had bought for her with our joint credit card. But the photo that broke my heart was one from just 2 weeks ago. Vanessa was wearing a beautiful necklace, and the caption read, "When someone special surprises you with the perfect gift. Spoiled, price grateful, price in love, I recognize that necklace. I'd seen the charge for it on our credit card, $2,400 at Tiffany and Co. When I'd asked Marcus about it, he'd told me it was a gift for his mother's birthday. But his mother's birthday wasn't until December, and she lived in Florida. And she definitely wasn't the type to wear a delicate diamond necklace that cost more than most people's monthly salary. I spent the next 3 hours going through every social media post, every photo, every piece of digital evidence I could find. The timeline was crystal clear. Marcus and Vanessa had been having an affair for at least 6 months, probably longer. They'd been to restaurants together, taken trips together, and he'd been buying her expensive gifts with money from our joint accounts. But what made it even worse was realizing how calculated it all was. Marcus hadn't just been cheating on me. He'd been living a completely double life, maintaining a relationship with another woman while systematically convincing me that my suspicions were symptoms of mental illness. Every Tuesday when he told me he was working late with a difficult client, he was having dinner with Vanessa. Every weekend work trip was actually a romantic getaway. Every time I smelled her perfume on his clothes and he made me feel crazy for mentioning it, he'd just come from being with her. The gaslighting hadn't been a side effect of the affair. It had been a deliberate strategy to keep me from discovering the truth. That evening, Marcus came home at his usual time around 9:30 p.m. I was in the kitchen, pretending to read a book while actually watching him carefully for any signs of deception I might have missed before. "Hey, babe," he said, kissing my cheek. "How was your day?" "Good," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "How was yours?" "Long," he said, loosening his tie. "Had to deal with some issues on the Morrison project, then had dinner with a potential investor." "You know how it is." I nodded, even though I knew he'd actually had dinner at Bella Vista with Vanessa. I could smell her perfume on him, the same Chanel No. 5 that was hidden under our bed. "Which investor?" I asked casually. Marcus paused for just a fraction of a second, so briefly that I might have missed it if I hadn't been watching for it. "Jim Patterson," he said. "He's thinking about putting money into the downtown development." It was such a smooth lie, delivered with complete confidence. If I hadn't known the truth, I would have believed him completely. That's great, I said. I hope it works out. Me too, Marcus said, and then he did something that made my skin crawl. He looked at me with that concerned expression I'd come to dread and said, "You seem a little tense tonight. Are you feeling anxious? Maybe you should take one of your pills." Even now, even when I knew the truth, he was still trying to gaslight me, still trying to make me doubt my own perceptions and attribute my feelings to mental illness. "I'm fine," I said. "Just tired." "Okay," he said, but he was still looking at me like he was worried about my mental state. "Just remember what Dr. Peterson said about managing your anxiety. I don't want you to spiral again like you did a few months ago." I hadn't spiraled a few months ago. I'd been responding normally to the stress of sensing that my husband was lying to me, but Marcus had convinced me, and apparently Dr. Peterson, that my completely rational concerns were symptoms of anxiety disorder. "I'll keep that in mind," I said. After Marcus went upstairs to shower, I sat in the kitchen and made a decision. I wasn't going to confront him yet. I wasn't going to let him know that I'd discovered his affair. Instead, I was going to continue gathering evidence until I had enough to protect myself legally and financially. Because if Marcus was capable of this level of deception and manipulation, I needed to assume he was capable of much worse. I needed to be prepared for the possibility that when I finally confronted him, he would try to destroy me in every way possible. I called Lisa back that night after Marcus had gone to bed. "I need a divorce attorney," I said without preamble. "Not you. I need you as my friend right now. But I need the best divorce attorney you know, someone who specializes in cases involving financial deception and emotional abuse." "Sarah," Lisa said gently, "what did you find?" I told her everything: the perfume bottle, the credit card charges, the phone records, the social media evidence. Lisa listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Jesus," she said finally. "Sarah, this is bad. This isn't just an affair. This is systematic financial and emotional abuse. He's been stealing from your joint accounts to fund his relationship with another woman while convincing you that you're mentally unstable." "I know," I said. "That's why I need the best attorney you know." "I'm going to give you the name of someone who's going to help you destroy him," Lisa said. "But first, I need you to promise me something. Don't let Marcus know that you know. Don't change your behavior, don't confront him, don't give him any reason to suspect that you're onto him. And start moving money from your joint accounts into an account that only you have access to. Is that legal?" "It's your money too," Lisa said. "And given that he's been using your joint funds to pay for his affair, you have every right to protect your assets. But do it gradually, small amounts at a time, so he doesn't notice." That night, I lay in bed next to my husband, listening to him breathe, and I felt something I'd never felt before in our 8 years of marriage: complete and utter clarity about who he really was. Marcus wasn't the loving, supportive husband I'd thought I'd married. He was a manipulative, calculating man who was capable of looking me in the eye and lying without a trace of guilt. He was someone who would use my mental health struggles against me, who would make me doubt my own sanity to cover his tracks. But he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated me. He'd assumed that because he could manipulate me emotionally, he could control me completely. He was about to learn how wrong he was. Tomorrow, I would start building the case that would end our marriage and expose him for exactly what he was. Tonight, I would lie next to him and let him think he'd won. But the game was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. Over the next 2 weeks, I became someone I'd never been before, a detective investigating my own life. Every morning after Marcus left for work, I would systematically go through our house, our finances, and our digital footprints, building an airtight case against the man who had been gaslighting me for months. The attorney Lisa recommended was named Patricia Hawkins, and she was exactly what I needed: sharp, experienced, and completely unsympathetic to cheating spouses who used emotional manipulation to cover their tracks. When I met with her in her downtown office, she listened to my story with the kind of focused intensity that made me feel like I was finally being taken seriously. "This is one of the more calculated cases of marital deception I've seen," Patricia said after I'd shown her all my evidence. Your husband hasn't just been having an affair. He's been conducting a systematic campaign to undermine your mental health and your ability to trust your own perceptions. That's going to work in our favor. How so? I asked. Because Colorado is a no-fault divorce state, which means the affair itself won't impact the division of assets, Patricia explained. But the financial deception will. He's been using marital funds to support his relationship with another woman, which is considered dissipation of marital assets. We can argue that he should be held responsible for every penny he spent on her. What about the gaslighting? That's harder to prove legally, but it establishes a pattern of emotional abuse that could influence custody decisions if you had children. And it certainly paints a picture of his character, Patricia said. The key is that we need to document everything. Every lie, every manipulation, every instance where he made you doubt your own sanity. I left Patricia's office with a clear plan. I would continue gathering evidence for another month, documenting everything while maintaining the facade of our normal marriage. Then, when I had enough proof to ensure I'd be protected financially and legally, I would confront Marcus with everything I'd discovered. But first, I needed to understand the full scope of his deception. But the perfume smell is real, I said. I'm not imagining that. No, you're probably not imagining the smell, Dr. Peterson agreed. But you might be imagining the significance of it. Marcus works in real estate. He meets with female clients regularly. It makes perfect sense that he would occasionally come home smelling like someone else's perfume. She increased my anxiety medication and suggested I try some cognitive behavioral therapy techniques to help me challenge my irrational thoughts about my marriage. I left her office feeling both relieved and ashamed. Relieved because there was an explanation for why I'd been feeling so suspicious and paranoid. Ashamed because I'd been doubting my husband, who had never given me any real reason not to trust him. But the feelings didn't go away. If anything, they got stronger. Marcus started coming home even later, sometimes not until after midnight. When I'd wake up and ask where he'd been, he'd sigh and give me that look again. I was at the office, working on the Morrison project, he'd say. You can call my assistant tomorrow if you want to verify that. But Sarah, this has to stop. I can't have a marriage where my wife doesn't trust me, where she's constantly questioning my every move. I'm not constantly questioning you, I'd say. I'm just concerned because you're working such long hours and you seem so distant lately. I'm working long hours because I'm trying to build a future for us, Marcus would say. I'm distant because it's hard to be close to someone who's constantly suspicious of you. How am I supposed to feel romantic and connected when you're treating me like a criminal? And then he'd turn away from me in bed, leaving me lying there in the dark, wondering if I was destroying my marriage with my paranoia and anxiety. The breaking point came on a Thursday night in July. Marcus had texted me around 6 to say he'd be working late again, probably wouldn't be home until after 11. I'd made dinner for myself, watched a movie, and gone to bed around 10:30, expecting to be asleep when he got home. But I woke up at 1:47 a.m. to the sound of the front door closing. I heard Marcus moving around downstairs, heard the shower, turn on in the guest bathroom instead of our master bathroom, heard him moving quietly up the stairs almost an hour later. When he slipped into bed beside me, I pretended to be asleep, but I could smell it immediately. That same perfume, stronger than ever, mixed with something else I couldn't identify. Something that made my stomach clench with a certainty I'd been trying to ignore for months. I lay there in the dark, my heart pounding, trying to convince myself that I was overreacting, that there was a reasonable explanation, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very, very wrong. The next morning, Marcus was already gone when I woke up. He'd left a note on the kitchen counter. Had to leave early for a site visit. Love you. M. I called in sick to work, something I rarely did, and spent the day trying to make sense of what I was feeling. I cleaned the house obsessively, reorganized closets, did laundry, anything to keep my hands busy while my mind raced. That's when I decided to look under our bed. I don't know what made me think to look there. Maybe it was intuition, maybe it was desperation, maybe it was just the methodical way I was cleaning every inch of our house. But as I was vacuuming our bedroom, I got down on my hands and knees to clean under the bed, and that's when I saw it. A small, elegant bottle of perfume, pushed far back against the wall, where it would be almost impossible to see unless you were looking for it. I pulled it out with shaking hands and read the label. Chanel No. 5. The same scent I'd been smelling on Marcus's clothes for months. The same scent he'd been telling me came from clients and colleagues. The same scent that had been driving me slowly insane while he convinced me I was being paranoid and irrational. But this wasn't just any bottle of Chanel No. 5. This was a bottle that had been used, that had someone's fingerprints on it, that had been hidden under my bed like a secret. I sat on our bedroom floor, holding the evidence of my husband's betrayal, and for the first time in months, I felt completely, crystal clearly sane. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't letting my anxiety create problems where there weren't any. My husband was having an affair, and he'd been gaslighting me for months, making me doubt my own perceptions and sanity to cover his tracks. As I sat there with that perfume bottle in my hands, I realized that this was just the beginning. If Marcus had been lying to me about this, what else had he been lying about? If he was capable of making me doubt my own sanity, what other manipulation had I been blind to? I had a choice to make. I could confront him with the perfume bottle and demand an explanation. I could pretend I'd never found it and continue living in the carefully constructed reality he'd created for me. Or I could start digging deeper, start looking for more evidence, start preparing for the possibility that my entire marriage was built on lies. I chose option 3. Because if Marcus thought he could make me doubt my own sanity, he was about to learn that he'd seriously underestimated the woman he'd married. The gaslighting was over. The real investigation was just beginning. Finding that perfume bottle under our bed was like flipping a switch in my brain. Suddenly, all the self-doubt and confusion that had been clouding my thoughts for months disappeared, replaced by a crystal-clear determination to uncover the truth. If Marcus could lie to my face for months while making me question my own sanity, then I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. I carefully placed the Chanel No. 5 bottle back exactly where I'd found it, taking a photo first to document its location. Then I sat down at my laptop and started making a list of every suspicious incident I could remember from the past 6 months. Every late night, every defensive response, every time he'd made me feel like I was losing my mind. The pattern was so obvious now that I wasn't looking at it through the lens of self-doubt Marcus had trained me to use. The late nights had started in January, right after our Cabo trip. The phone protectiveness had begun around the same time. The perfume smell had first appeared in February and had become increasingly frequent since then. But what really made my blood run cold was remembering how systematically he'd undermined my confidence in my own perceptions. Every time I'd brought up a concern, he'd immediately redirected the conversation to my mental health. He'd weaponized my anxiety against me, using my own vulnerability as a tool to make me doubt reality. That afternoon, I called my best friend, Lisa, a divorce attorney who'd been my roommate in college. I hadn't talked to her about my marriage concerns because Marcus had convinced me they were all in my head, but now I needed someone I could trust completely. Sarah? Lisa answered on the first ring. This is a surprise. How are you? I need to ask you something, I said without preamble. And I need you to promise me that this conversation stays between us, no matter what. Of course, Lisa said, and I could hear the concern in her voice. What's going on? If someone wanted to investigate whether their spouse was having an affair, hypothetically, what would be the best way to gather evidence? There was a long pause. Sarah, are we talking about Marcus? Hypothetically, I repeated. Okay, hypothetically, Lisa said carefully. The most important thing would be to document everything without alerting the spouse that they're being investigated. Photos, screenshots, credit card statements, phone records if you can access them legally. But Sarah, if this isn't hypothetical, you need to be very careful. If Marcus is having an affair and he's been gaslighting you about it, he's not going to react well to being caught. What do you mean? I mean that someone who's capable of manipulating their spouse's sense of reality for months is capable of other forms of manipulation and control, Lisa said. Promise me that if you're doing what I think you're doing, you'll be smart about it. Don't confront him until you have irrefutable evidence, and don't do it when you're alone with him. After I hung up with Lisa, I spent the rest of the afternoon planning my investigation. I had access to our joint credit card accounts online, so I started there, going through months of statements looking for charges I didn't recognize. What I found made my stomach drop. There were dozens of charges I'd never noticed before. Restaurants I'd never been to, hotels in Denver when Marcus was supposedly working late, charges at Victoria's Secret and Nordstrom that definitely weren't for me. There was even a charge for a weekend at a resort in Vail that had happened in March when Marcus told me he was at a real estate conference in Phoenix. But the most damning evidence was a pattern of charges at the same restaurant, Bella Vista, an upscale Italian place downtown, every Tuesday night for the past 3 months. Marcus had told me he was working late every Tuesday, dealing with a particularly difficult client. Instead, he'd been having dinner dates. I screenshotted everything, creating a folder on my laptop labeled medical records, something Marcus would never think to look at. Then I started going through our phone records. Marcus and I were on the same family plan, which meant I could see the call and text logs for both our numbers. What I found there was even more devastating than the credit card charges. For 6 months, my husband Marcus told me I was losing my mind. Every time I questioned the late nights, the mysterious phone calls, the way he'd suddenly become protective of his phone, he'd look at me with that concerned expression and say, "Honey, you're being paranoid. You're letting your anxiety get the best of you again." But that night, when I found her perfume under our bed, the same perfume I'd been smelling on his clothes for weeks, I realized I wasn't crazy at all. I was just married to a man who was very good at making me doubt my own sanity. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and this is the story of how I discovered that the person who was supposed to protect me from the world was actually the one destroying my sense of reality. This is about how my husband of 8 years systematically convinced me that my instincts were wrong, my observations were flawed, and my concerns were symptoms of mental illness. And this is about the moment I found undeniable proof that I had been right all along. It started in January, just after we'd returned from what I thought was a perfect vacation in Cabo. Marcus and I had been married for 8 years, together for 10, and I genuinely believed we had one of those rare, solid marriages that would last forever. He was a successful real estate developer, I was a pediatric nurse at Denver Children's Hospital, and we lived in a beautiful house in Cherry Hills Village that we'd renovated together over the past 3 years. Marcus was everything I'd thought I wanted in a husband when we met at a mutual friend's wedding in 2014. He was tall, confident, successful, with dark hair and blue eyes that made me feel like I was the only woman in the room when he looked at me. He was the kind of man who remembered anniversaries, brought me flowers for no reason, and could fix anything that broke in our house. My friends envied our relationship, my mother adored him, and I felt like the luckiest woman alive. But something changed after our Cabo trip. Marcus started working later, claiming he had several big developments in the works that required his constant attention. He'd leave the house at 7 in the morning and not come home until 9 or 10 at night, sometimes later. When I'd ask about his day, he'd give me vague answers about meetings and site visits and dealing with contractors. "You know how it is, in real estate, babe," he'd say, loosening his tie and heading straight for the shower. "Everything's always a crisis that needs to be handled immediately." At first, I didn't think much of it. Marcus had always been ambitious, always working on the next big deal. But then I started noticing other changes. He'd become protective of his phone, taking it with him to the bathroom, sleeping with it face down on his nightstand instead of on the charger across the room like he used to. When it would buzz with notifications, he'd quickly check it and then put it away without mentioning who had texted or called. "Who was that?" I'd ask casually. "Just work stuff," he'd say. Nothing important. But the way he said it, the way he wouldn't meet my eyes, made something twist in my stomach. Then there was the smell. A perfume I didn't recognize. Something floral and expensive that would cling to his shirts and jackets. The first time I noticed it, I asked him about it. "I smell perfume on your shirt," I said as he was getting undressed for bed. "Did you have a meeting with a female client today?" Marcus paused, his shirt halfway over his head. "Yeah, actually. I showed a property to this woman who was looking for an investment opportunity. She was wearing some pretty strong perfume. You know how some women overdo it. It was a reasonable explanation, and I accepted it." But then I smelled it again the next week, and the week after that. Always the same scent, always with the same explanation about female clients or colleagues who wore too much perfume. Maybe you should suggest they tone it down, I joked one evening, trying to keep my voice light. That smell is really strong. I can't exactly tell a client how to dress or what perfume to wear, Marcus said, but there was an edge to his voice that I'd never heard before. That would be incredibly inappropriate. I wasn't suggesting you tell them what to do, I said, confused by his defensive tone. I was just making a joke. Well, it wasn't funny, he said, and he walked out of the room, leaving me standing there wondering what I'd said wrong. That's when the gaslighting really began, though I didn't recognize it at the time. Every concern I raised, every question I asked, every observation I made was met with the same response. I was being paranoid. I was overthinking things. I was letting my anxiety control my thoughts. Marcus would look at me with this mixture of concern and frustration, like he was dealing with a child who was having an irrational tantrum. Sarah, honey, you're doing that thing again, he'd say when I'd mention the perfume or ask about his late nights. You're creating problems where there aren't any. Maybe you should talk to Dr. Peterson about adjusting your anxiety medication. Dr. Peterson was my psychiatrist, whom I'd been seeing for the past 2 years to manage generalized anxiety disorder. I'd been open with Marcus about my mental health struggles, and he'd always been supportive, coming to appointments with me when I asked, helping me remember to take my medication, being patient when I had panic attacks or particularly anxious days. But now, suddenly, every concern I had was being attributed to my anxiety. Every question was evidence that I needed to work on my mental health. Every instinct I had was dismissed as a symptom of my disorder. I'm not being anxious. I'd protest. I'm being observant. Something feels different about you, about us. I can sense it. That's exactly what anxiety does, Marcus would say patiently. It makes you hypervigilant, makes you look for problems that don't exist. You're seeing threats where there aren't any. The worst part was that he was so calm about it, so reasonable sounding. He never raised his voice, never got angry, never made me feel like he was attacking me. Instead, he made me feel like he was trying to help me, like he was concerned about my well-being and wanted me to get better. I love you, Sarah, he'd say, pulling me into a hug after these conversations. I just want you to be happy and healthy, but you can't keep letting your anxiety convince you that I'm doing something wrong when I'm not. And because I loved him, because I trusted him, because I had struggled with anxiety for years and knew how it could distort my thinking, I started to believe him. I started to doubt my own perceptions, my own instincts, my own sanity. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe the perfume smell was just from clients and colleagues. Maybe his late nights really were just about work. Maybe I was creating problems where there weren't any because my anxiety was making me hypervigilant and suspicious. I made an appointment with Dr. Peterson and told her about my concerns about Marcus and my marriage. She listened carefully, asked thoughtful questions, and then gave me advice that I now realize was exactly what Marcus had been hoping for. It sounds like your anxiety might be manifesting as relationship paranoia, she said. This is actually quite common, especially in people with generalized anxiety disorder. Your brain is looking for threats, and when it can't find real ones, it creates imaginary ones.